My name is Mira Price, and I am 67 years old. If you saw me on the street, I've learned that you might assume I spend my days gardening or reading paperbacks. Most betrayals start as a soft, those things do bring me joy. A quiet sound we ignore until the whole house shakes. Budget. For most of my life, I believed my parents were good people. Forecasting. Flawed, yes. Finance has been sometimes self-absorbed through every season of my life. I grew up as their only daughter, but grounding, the quiet child who learned early how to keep the peace. And I have always found my father favored silence over apologies. For nearly 2 decades, and my mother favored image as chief financial officer for a mid-sized manufacturing company in the Midwest. When I retired early at 60, never expecting I planned to ease into a slower after rhythm. I married my husband. But ironically, David, retirement brought its own kind of chaos. His parents, especially my in-laws, within my Mark family, and Evelyn, my sister welcomed Margaret, me not as an ornament married a man named Bruce, but as a person worth knowing. Years ago. It was Evelyn always who taught me to cook in the way people instead of salt, when they need to be taken and Mark seriously. Showed me that a calm the kind of man carry more authority than anger. A straight shooter. They weren't perfect, even though every sentence but they were consistent curves towards self-importance. And consistency was a luxury in my childhood home. He bounced the wedding jewelry Evelyn gifted me, sometimes lasting heavy gold 2 years, a necklace woven with tiny rubies, and earrings shaped like incompetent management. Every time extravagant tradition, but he was charming in an oily way. And he had a knack she wanted me to have something like they represented strength passed my down relationship through the women of her family had always been. I didn't realize then how deeply I that never trusted would matter years later. His jewelry lived in a small cedar box on the top shelf of my bedroom closet, and his failures I rarely wore never his fault. But each time I opened that box, for the sake of my sister, seemed to smell faintly of rosemary and old stories. Around the time I retired, I kept them polished. Bruce took a sudden interest in my finances, accounted for. Not from then concern or curiosity, long after David had passed away, comparison. Long after I had retired and begun living quietly in the same house we shared. If you'd invested differently, my parents' calls you'd have doubled what you have right now. My father would insist he simply missed my voice. I don't know why people treat finance like some complicated conversation language with long pauses. It's all common waiting for me to ask the question she wanted me to ask. I had no desire to argue with a man who believed confidence was a substitute for competence. We're managing. But one evening at a family barbecue, barely, but he crossed a line he couldn't uncross. I didn't pry. It happened when my nephew asked me about budgeting for college. Drama without intervention. I gave him a simple piece of advice. Honestly, I believed them. Automate, after all, and avoid lifestyle. They were nearly 90, retired, nothing dramatic, and living on fixed income. Bruce laughed, but something loud enough when they insisted on visiting me for a weekend. Eleanor, they had with all due respect, you're smart, sure. My mother suddenly wanted to reconnect. And my father, who disliked handling money better, disliked doctors. The words agreed without a hint of complaint. Not cruel, even then. Just dismissive. I didn't notice the foreshadowing. I didn't notice the way my mother's eyes scanned the house, and people heard by room. They looked I didn't notice how my father lingered by the closet door when he came to fetch an extra towel. Something shifted inside me. I simply thought I was lucky. Even clarity. Lucky to have aging parents who finally wanted. It was about the man my sister had to be entering a season of life where things felt calm what he didn't understand. The night before they left, my mother hugged me longer than usual. I didn't argue. Sharp. I didn't correct him. Clung to me. But in that quiet space after his laughter faded, I made a private decision. I wasn't going to teach Bruce a lesson. I was simply living my quiet life. I was going to let him teach it to himself. But her voice trembled with something all I needed to do was give him the space to do it. And the opportunity arrived sooner than I expected. Guilt. At the time, 3 days I had recently agreed to serve part-time as a financial advisor for a growing logistics firm led by a former colleague. Every quiet sound I'd ignored became mostly analytical. I stood there still meaningful. What I didn't know then was that this job, from age, this quiet little return to the world of numbers, that whatever story would become the stage where Bruce's arrogance unraveled to reveal itself. And I had no idea just how deep their betrayal watching the truth reveal itself. I remember standing there, always do, staring at the empty space on the shelf, begun yet, feeling my breath turned shallow. The cedar box had always been there, deep in my bones, untouched by anyone that exposes Bruce. Losing it felt like losing a piece of the life I had built with David and the family that had welcomed me in the most mundane way. The first thought that hit me was irrational. Over dinner with my sister, I wondered if I'd misplaced it. She and Bruce had joined me at a small Italian restaurant near my house. Blaming age the kind every moment of forgetfulness, soft lighting, but I knew exactly and a steady quiet that made you feel like the world outside had slowed down. When I'd last opened Margaret chatted about home repairs, come first, her garden club, and her new Pilates routine. That I had allowed Bruce someone into my home who had taken himself into each topic, stretching every story until he became the reluctant hero. Cabinets. even checking inside the laundry basket, but halfway through the meal, might have tumbled there by accident. Said something that made my deep down I knew midair. The only people who had been in my home were my parents. Not the betrayal fell on me like cold water. Down. That evening, I called them this time. My mother answered. Bruce scoffed, breathless, leaning back in his chair as if he were the aggrieved party. She sang into the receiver. Same nonsense. Did you get home safely from the grocery store? Didn't appreciate innovation. You sound winded. They want numbers, but don't know how to get them. I'm calling because my wedding jewelry is missing. They triple revenue in a year. Silence. He said it so confidently that Margaret nodded. Even though she didn't seem to understand what he meant. Are you sure? Then came the moment. Very sure. The moment that shifted the axis of everything. I heard a soft rustling. Margaret looked at me. My father muttered something. Eleanor, my mother shushed him. You said you're consulting now. When she spoke again, do you think your company might have any false concern? Even something temporary? Bruce, you know how so things get misplaced. And money. I didn't misplace it. I blinked. I said slowly. She inhaled Bruce sharply, grinned like someone who'd already won. Sound she had perfected maybe over that decades. Would be a good fit. Are you implying we took I could straighten out some of the outdated processes you guys use. A lifetime of walking on eggshells around her made me hesitate. I took a sip of water to hide my smile. Because I knew something he didn't. The quiet on the other end of the line became heavy, but not in sales. My father took the phone. Not in marketing, he said. In finance, defensive, an entry-level position. Your mother didn't take any data verification. His use of your mother instead of we documentation. The kind of job that exposed every exaggeration, every inconsistency, every shortcut. I'm not accusing you. But before I said anything, I'm asking if you saw the cedar box. Bruce, no, what exactly do you think my job entails? And frankly, we're insulted. He waved a hand dismissively. It was not outrage I felt, numbers, but confirmation. Budgets. That night, whatever, sitting alone at my dining table, all the time. I kept replaying the weekend in my mind. My mother's sudden desire to reconnect. Of course not, my father wandering upstairs. Finance is just organized common sense. Their overly affectionate goodbye, the arrogance, all the puzzle pieces slid into place with sickening clarity. The casual dismissal of decades of expertise. I drove to their house. I nodded thoughtfully. My father answered the door with the wary expression of a man expecting judgment. But my mother appeared behind him, lips tight, eyeliner smudged as though she had cried, squeezed my hand, from manipulation or remorse. I felt a curious blend of sorrow and inevitability. My jewelry back. I never wanted to see my sister hurt. My mother lifted a trembling hand, but I also knew her true harm came from protecting someone from reality. We didn't think you'd not revealing it. For a moment, a week later, I couldn't Bruce speak. Interviewed at the firm. Audacity was and because stunning. He lied on his resume, she continued, overstated his achievements, needed the money, and talked in circles around direct questions. We were drowning. The interview almost and your father insisted we not bother you. The CEO, my father, cut in sharply, colleague, a slip of guilt. Eleanor, we didn't have a choice. This man is. You had a choice. Confident, I said quietly. That he is. You could have asked. And wrong. We were ashamed. Wildly wrong, my mother whispered. But confident. I looked at them both. Was he two rude? Nearly 90-year-old people who still wielded manipulation like a finely honed not instrument. Rude. And just I felt something unaware. Inside me calcify. I exhaled slowly. Not anger. Would you believe not me if sadness. I said hiring him might something be useful? Resolve. There was a pause. I left without then another quiet word. Laugh. But I knew either this planning wasn't over, or you're not about because to prove I wanted revenge. Maybe both. And so Bruce was hired, on a probationary basis, in the finance department I supervised. He thought it was a victory. But it was the start of an unraveling he didn't yet see. Bruce enters a world where confidence cannot conceal incompetence, and the cracks begin to show almost immediately. From the outside, it might have seemed like I set a trap. But that wasn't the truth. I simply opened a door and watched Bruce walk through it, head high, unaware of the terrain beneath his feet. To understand why I didn't stop him, you need to know more about my sister. Margaret and I grew up in a quiet town in Indiana, raised by parents who believed in responsibility and humility. Our father worked 2 jobs. Our mother balanced the checkbook every Sunday night at the dining table. We weren't wealthy, but we were careful. Money was tracked. Decisions were considered. Honesty mattered. Margaret was always the softer one. Gentle, trusting, eager to see the good in people. I admired that about her, even as I worried she might one day trust someone who didn't deserve it. She married Bruce at 43, after a short whirlwind romance. He was charming then, attentive, flattering, generous. But charm without integrity is a slow poison. And I saw signs early on. The half-truths. The exaggerated accomplishments. The casual comments that chipped at Margaret's confidence. But she loved him. And she believed him. And I learned long ago that pulling someone away from what they think is love is like trying to unroot a tree with bare hands. So I stayed present. Patient. Ready, if needed. Bruce, meanwhile, developed a peculiar fascination with criticizing anything involving money. He scrutinized receipts at restaurants. He questioned the cost of home appliances. He lectured Margaret on her spending habits even though she earned more than he did most years. And he often weaponized condescension. His favorite line, one he used on me more times than I could count, was, "You're smart, Eleanor. But not everyone who's smart is good with money." That always made me smile privately, because I knew the true nature of people who say things like that. They aren't trying to teach. They're trying to elevate themselves by lowering someone else. All of this formed the backdrop when Bruce joined my department. On his first day, he arrived in a suit that didn't fit properly, carrying a leather briefcase that still had department store packaging foam inside. He looked around the office as though he was stepping into a kingdom he intended to conquer. "Where's my office?" he asked. I gestured toward a desk. "There. In the shared workspace." He blinked. "Shared?" "Yes," I said. "Everyone starts here." He didn't hide his disappointment, but he forced a grin. "Right. Gotta learn the ropes." He had no idea which ropes he was about to tangle himself in. Because in finance, precision isn't optional. You don't get to bluff your way through documentation. You don't improvise compliance reports. You don't charm an audit trail. Numbers are mirrors. They reflect exactly what you put into them. In the first week alone, Bruce made 17 errors. Not small ones. Errors that indicated he didn't understand basic accounting terminology. He mislabeled expenditures. Ignored reconciliation steps. Confused debits and credits. And when corrected, he deflected blame. His favorite excuse was, "The system isn't intuitive." Followed by, "Well, that's how we did it in my last company." And then, "You know, Eleanor, if you modernized some of these processes." I never raised my voice. I never insulted him. I never belittled him. I simply documented everything. Every mistake. Every correction. Every refusal to learn. Not to punish him, but to protect the company. And to ensure that when the truth surfaced, the facts, not my opinion, would speak. By week 3, he was already drowning. He just didn't know it yet. Bruce is about to make a mistake that crosses a line from incompetence into danger, triggering Eleanor's deeper investigation. The moment everything shifted happened on a quiet Thursday afternoon. Most of the team had left for the day, but I stayed late to review quarterly reports. That's when I noticed something odd, an entry in our vendor invoices that didn't match historical patterns. A logistics partner we'd used for years had submitted a routine invoice, but the categorization of the expense was wrong. Not just mislabeled, misallocated in a way that suggested deliberate alteration. And the entry was made by Bruce. I didn't react outwardly. I simply highlighted the line, printed the page, and added it to a folder I kept for performance documentation. But something told me to dig deeper. So I pulled every entry Bruce had touched in the past 2 weeks. What I found was a pattern, not fraud, but recklessness. He was reclassifying expenses without understanding the implications. Consolidating categories that legally needed to remain separate. Skipping approval steps. Failing to upload backup documentation. Then trying to retroactively cover the gap by attaching unrelated files. At best, it was incompetence. At worst, it was a compliance nightmare waiting to erupt. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wanted the full picture. So I cross-checked timestamps. I reviewed audit trails. I examined his task logs. And I found something crucial. He was rushing through assignments in a fraction of the required time, likely because he didn't understand the processes and hoped speed would mask confusion. But finance doesn't reward speed. It punishes sloppiness. When I looked at the full stack of his errors, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, but sadness. Sadness for my sister, who believed she'd married a man who could lead, support, and provide. And sadness for Bruce himself, because beneath all his bravado was a terrified man scrambling to avoid being exposed. Still, truth is truth. The next morning, I initiated a departmental review. Not targeting him, just standard risk assessment. But the process would expose every inconsistency, and all he had to do was let his own work speak. When I informed the team, Bruce responded with his usual flair of misplaced confidence. "This is good," he said loudly. "Honestly, Eleanor, I've been meaning to point out some inefficiencies. Maybe we can fix some of these outdated practices." The younger analysts exchanged glances. They already knew he was out of his depth. During the review, I sat quietly as team members audited files. It didn't take long. One analyst raised her hand. "Eleanor, half of these entries have missing documentation." Another added, "Some of these classifications violate reporting standards." "Who handled this batch?" Silence fell. Bruce cleared his throat. "Well, I probably did some of them, but the previous system wasn't clear." I looked at him calmly. "The system timestamps show these were created by you, recently." He reddened but said nothing. The team continued. Every error worsened the picture. But the turning point came when one analyst discovered an invoice Bruce attempted to correct, which actually increased an expense category in a way that could have triggered an audit red flag. When she explained this, Bruce snapped. "Look, can we stop acting like tiny mistakes are the end of the world? Finance people are too dramatic about this stuff." The room went silent. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not of consequences, of being revealed as incompetent. But the review wasn't even the real turning point. The real turning point came later that day when I checked his employee file and found something alarming. Discrepancies in his resume bold enough to constitute falsification. Not just embellishment. Lies. And now I had more than mistakes. I had motive to investigate deeper. Eleanor is about to uncover the full extent of Bruce's deception, including something that threatens not only the company but her sister's security. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. Bruce had built his entire professional identity on fabrication. His resume wasn't inflated. It was fictional. He claimed 5 years of financial oversight at a company that never existed. He listed certifications he never earned. He cited software proficiency that contradicted every action he had taken. But what struck me most was the pattern. He wasn't malicious. He was desperate. Bruce had crafted a persona, competent, confident, superior, that shielded him from his own fear of inadequacy. And when life pressed against the facade, he doubled down instead of facing reality. Still, regardless of the psychology behind it, the consequences were real. And dangerous. I compiled everything: documentation errors, policy violations, resume inconsistencies, and built a chronological, factual report. 26 pages long. Every line sourced. Every detail verifiable. Before I submitted it to the CEO, I made one final check. I reviewed the payroll changes Bruce had submitted the previous week. And there it was. He had attempted to adjust his own pay grade. Not successfully. The system rejected unauthorized changes, but he had tried. That crossed a line from negligence into intentional misconduct. With that, the investigation became formal. The CEO called me into his office. "Eleanor, this is serious." "I know. He could have put us at compliance risk." "I know. And I assume you want to be the one to talk to him." I nodded. "Yes." Calmly. Factually. He sighed. "You're the only one he listens to, even if he resents it." That afternoon, HR scheduled a meeting with Bruce. He was told it was a standard performance review. He strutted in, confident as ever, until he saw me sitting across from the table with the file. His smile faltered. "What's going on?" he asked. I folded my hands. "Bruce, we need to discuss your performance, your documentation issues, and inconsistencies found during the review." He blinked rapidly. "Inconsistencies?" I thought this was routine. "It was," I said, "until the facts escalated it." As I went through each point, his posture changed. Shoulders shrinking, breath quickening, his eyes darting to the door as though searching for an escape. At first, he denied everything. Then he deflected. Then he grew defensive. But numbers don't bend. Audit trails don't lie. System logs don't choose sides. Finally, after nearly an hour, he whispered, "Please don't tell Margaret." And that was the moment, the exact second, his arrogance cracked. Not because of the company. Not because of consequences. But because of my sister. I closed the file gently. "Bruce, the deception here affects more than the business. It affects trust. It affects credibility. And it affects the woman who believes in you." His face crumpled. I had no satisfaction in that moment. Only clarity. The truth needed to come out, but not as punishment. As a path. A painful path, yes, but one that could lead to honesty if he chose it. Company policy was clear. HR began termination procedures. But my part wasn't finished yet. I needed to talk to Margaret. Because truth without compassion is cruelty. And compassion without truth is betrayal. Eleanor prepares to reveal everything to her sister, knowing the truth may break her heart, and change their family forever. I invited Margaret to my home the next evening. Just the two of us, no distractions. I made tea, lit a soft lamp, and let the room settle into the kind of quiet where truth can finally breathe. She sat on my couch, hands clasped, sensing something was wrong. "Eleanor, is this about Bruce?" He said work is stressful, but... I sat beside her. "Margaret, before we talk, I need you to know this isn't about judgment. It's about facts." Her face paled. "Facts," she whispered. I nodded and handed her the summary I'd prepared. Clean, simple, readable. Not the full report. Just the essentials. She took a long moment before reading it. As her eyes moved down the page, her breathing changed. Shallow. Quick. She whispered. "He lied. About all of this." "Yes. But why? Why would he do that?" I spoke gently. "Because he's afraid. And because pretending felt easier to him than working to become who he claimed to be." Tears filled her eyes. All these years he told me I spent too much. That I didn't understand money. That he was the one keeping us stable. "I know." She shook her head. "Was any of it true?" "No." Silence stretched between us, thick and aching. She wiped her cheeks and whispered, "I feel so foolish." I placed a hand over hers. "No. You believed someone you loved. That isn't foolish. That's human." She leaned into me then, small and trembling like she had when we were girls and thunderstorms rattled our windows. After a long time, she asked the question she feared most. "What will happen to him?" "He's being terminated." But gently. Quietly. Without public embarrassment. She nodded slowly. "And what do I do?" "That," I said softly, "is your choice. Not mine." The next day, Margaret asked Bruce to come home early. I don't know exactly what happened in their conversation, but I know Margaret. She leads with kindness and follows with resolve. She moved out a week later, staying with me until she found her own place. Bruce tried calling me once, asking if I could fix things. I told him the truth. "I didn't break anything, Bruce. You did. And now is your chance to start telling the truth, to yourself most of all." He hung up. It was the final conversation we ever had. Justice is in motion, but Eleanor must now navigate the aftermath, professionally and personally, as the consequences unfold. Bruce's termination was handled professionally. HR documented the falsifications, issued the formal notice, and ensured compliance protocols were followed meticulously. Internally, few people asked questions. Finance departments understand that mistakes happen, but patterns do not. Bruce faded from the company quietly, leaving behind a desk filled with unopened training manuals and notes scribbled with half-understood terminology. But his personal life faced a harsher reckoning. Margaret filed for a separation. She wasn't vindictive. She simply no longer recognized the man who treated her like an obstacle to his ego. Bruce begged at first, made promises, claimed he was sabotaged, insisted the company was out to get him. But Margaret had seen the evidence. Numbers don't manipulate. People do. Soon, the truth settled in even for him. His bravado dulled. His voice lost its edge. He moved into a small apartment across town and took a job that finally fit his actual skill set, a warehouse clerk. Honest work, but work without illusion. As for the company, they implemented new hiring protocols. Stronger verification. Additional screening for roles involving fiscal responsibility. My report led to policy revisions that strengthened the department. The CEO pulled me aside one afternoon. "Eleanor, not everyone could have handled this with your composure." I smiled politely. Numbers are never personal. But people always are. And in the quiet moments after, when my office settled into its evening stillness, I felt something else, a soft exhale of closure. Not triumph. Not revenge. Resolution. Because Bruce hadn't been my enemy. His dishonesty had. And now the truth had done what truth always does. It illuminated. For Margaret, it was a painful freedom. She rediscovered herself slowly. Took financial literacy classes. Opened a separate account. Started painting again. And every week, she grew steadier, stronger, more herself. For me, life returned to its gentle rhythm. Work, garden, long walks in the early morning sun. But something in me shifted as well. I realized that justice doesn't have to be dramatic. Often, it's just clarity replacing confusion. Truth replacing pretense. And accountability replacing arrogance. With the dust settling, Eleanor reflects on everything learned, and prepares to share the story's moral heart. Now, looking back months later, I see the entire journey with a kind of softened clarity. Not as a story of revenge, but as a story of revelation. I didn't destroy Bruce's life. I simply stopped protecting the illusions he had built. And when illusions fall, they make a particular sound, a quiet shattering, followed by the slow rearranging of what remains. I learned something important. Arrogance collapses under its own weight, and competence stands on its own feet. My sister learned something too. Love is not blind trust. Love is choosing truth even when it hurts. And Bruce? Well, I hope he learned the most valuable lesson of all. You cannot build a life on borrowed confidence. Not forever. As for me, I remain who I have always been. Steady, patient, anchored in the quiet honesty of numbers. But I also carry a deeper understanding now. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let the truth speak. Calmly. Gently. Unavoidable. And so, to you, listening to my story, I'll leave you with this reflection. If someone in your life diminishes you, dismisses you, or belittles what you know, remember that expertise doesn't shout. It simply stands. And in the end, truth requires no defense. It only requires time. If this story resonated with you, tell me, what would you have done in my place? And have you ever seen arrogance collapse under its own weight? I'd love to hear your thoughts.